She's always getting Gus to speculate for her, and I'm sure she never pays when she loses. Miss Bart could shudder at this without embarrassment. Her own position was surely quite different. There could be no question of her not paying when she lost, since Trenor had assured her that she was certain not to lose. In sending her the check, he explained that he had made $5,000 for her out of Rosedale's tip and had put $4,000 back in the same venture, as there was the promise of another big rise. She understood that he was now speculating with her own money, and that she consequently owed him no more than the gratitude with such a trifling service demanded. She vaguely supposed that, to raise the first sum, he had borrowed on her securities, but this was a point over which her curiosity did not linger. It was concentrated on the probable date of the next big rise. The news of this event was received weeks later at Jack Stepney's marriage to Miss von Osberg. The marriage was celebrated in the village church near the paternal estate on the Hudson. It was the simple country wedding to which guests are conveyed in special trains and from which the hordes of the uninvited have to be fended off by the police. While these sylvan rites were taking place in a church packed with fashion and festooned with orchids, the representatives of the press were threading their way, notebook in hand, through the labyrinth of wedding presents. It was the kind of scene in which Lily had often pictured herself as taking the principal part, and on this occasion, the fact that she was once more merely a spectator instead of the mystically veiled figure occupying the center of attention strengthened her resolve to assume the latter part before the year was over. The fact that her immediate anxieties were relieved did not blind her to a possibility of the reoccurrence. It merely gave her enough buoyancy to rise once more above her doubts and feel a renewed faith in her beauty, her power, and her fitness to attract a brilliant destiny. A special opportuneness was given to these reflections by the discovery in a neighboring pew of the serious profile and neatly trimmed beard of Mr. Percy Gryce. There was something almost bridal in his aspect. His large white gardenia struck Lily as a good omen. She fancied he was the kind of man whose sentimental associations would be stirred by a wedding, and she pictured herself in the seclusion of the Van Osberg conservatories, playing skillfully upon sensibilities, thus prepared for her touch. The sight of Selden's dark head in a pew almost facing her disturbed for a moment the balance of her complacency. The rise of her blood as their eyes met was succeeded by a wave of resistance. She did not wish to see him again, not because she feared his influence, but because his presence had the effect of cheapening her aspirations, of throwing her whole world out of focus. Besides, he was a living reminder of the worst mistake in her career, and the fact that he had been its cause did not soften her feelings. She could still imagine an ideal state of existence in which intercourse with Selden might be the last touch of luxury. But in the world as it was, such a privilege was likely to cost more than it was worth. Lily, dear, I never saw you look so lovely. You look as if something delightful had just happened to you. Miss Gertrude Farish typified the mediocre and the ineffectual. Of course, being fatally poor and dingy, it was wise of Gertie to have taken up philanthropy and concerts, but there was something irritating in her assumption that existence yielded no higher pleasures, that one might get as much excitement out of life in a cramped flat as in the splendors of the Van Osberg establishment. Today, however, her chirping enthusiasms did not irritate Lily. They seemed only to throw her own exceptionalness into becoming relief. "Do let us go and take a peep at the presents before everyone else leaves the dining room," suggested Miss Farish. It was characteristic of her to take a sentimental and unenvious interest in all the details of a wedding. She always kept her handkerchief out during the service and departed clutching a box of wedding cake. "Isn't everything beautifully done?" she pursued as they entered the drawing room assigned to the display of Miss Van Osburgh's bridal spoils. "I always say no one does things better than Cousin Grace. I made up my mind weeks ago that I wouldn't miss this wedding, and when Lawrence Selden heard I was coming, he insisted on fetching me himself, and this evening I am to dine with him at Sherry's. I really feel as excited as if I were getting married myself." Lily smiled. She knew that Selden had always been kind to his dull cousin, and now the thought gave her a vague pleasure. "Do you see him often?" she asked. "Yes, he is very good about dropping in on Sundays, and now and then we do a play together, but lately I haven't seen much of him. He seems unsettled, the dear fellow. I do wish he would marry some nice girl. I told him so, but he said he didn't care for the really nice ones, and the other kind didn't care for him. But that was just his joke, of course. He could never marry a girl who wasn't nice. Oh, my dear, did you ever see such pearls?" They had paused before the bride's jewels, and Lily's heart gave an envious throb. The glow of the stones warmed Lily's veins like wine. More completely than any other expression of wealth, they symbolized the life she longed to lead, the life of fastidiousness, aloofness, and refinement, in which every detail should have the finish of a jewel and the whole form a harmonious setting to her own jewel-like rareness. "Do look at this exquisite white sapphire," Miss Farish exclaimed. "I'm sure the person who chose it must have taken particular pains. What is the name? Percy Gryce? Oh, I'm not surprised." She smiled significantly. "Of course you've heard that he's perfectly devoted to Evie Van Osburgh. Cousin Grace is so pleased. It's quite a romance. He met her first at the George Dorset's only 6 weeks ago, and it's just the nicest possible marriage for dear Evie. Oh, I don't mean the money, of course. She has plenty of her own, but she's such a quiet, stay-at-home kind of girl, and he has just the same taste, so they are exactly suited to each other." Lily stood staring vacantly at the white sapphire on its velvet bed. Evie Van Osburgh and Percy Gryce. The names rang derisively through her brain. Evie Van Osburgh, the youngest, dumbest, dullest of the 4 dull and dumpy daughters. Lily's lightheadedness sank beneath a renewed sense of failure. Life was too stupid, too blundering. Why should Percy Gryce's millions be joined to another great fortune? Why should this clumsy girl be put in possession of powers she would never know how to use?